When I signed up to study abroad in Iceland, I thought I was just chasing landscapes. My degree was environmental sciences, and I figured a semester overseas would give me something fresh. Glaciers, volcanoes, untouched ecosystems. But as it turns out, what I found was much older and stranger than anything I could have ever expected. I arrived in Iceland during late August. The air was brisk, but not bitter, and the sky stretched on forever, wide and clean. The family I was staying with met me at the small airport. A warm, quiet man, his wife, and their young son who looked to be around 9. They would be hosting me for my stay in Iceland. For this story, I will call them Dad, Mom, and Son. From the moment I met them, I could tell I was going to like them. They weren't overly chatty or fake friendly like you sometimes get with host families. They just had a calm kindness about them, like they genuinely cared. They did everything they could to make me feel welcome. Smiles, eye contact, offers to help me with my bags. They even brought me a homemade lunch for the drive to their house. Their home was about 45 minutes outside of town, settled between low hills and open grasslands. It wasn't huge, but it was respectable. A comfortable, lived-in place. The kitchen was spacious and bright with big windows that faced the east. And best of all, I had my own bedroom. It was simple, a twin bed, a small desk, and a tall dresser. But it was clean and warm, and after a long flight, that was all I wanted. But what really struck me was the land outside. I remember stepping out into the backyard the moment we got there, and just standing there. There was a wide garden off to the left, full of herbs and root vegetables, with little homemade markers poking up from the soil. A narrow creek wound its way behind the property, its banks lined with moss and low ferns. The air smelled like damp earth and something sweet I couldn't quite place. But beyond all that, what caught my eye the most was something a little further back. There was a stone wall. It stood about 5 feet high and stretched across the back edge of their property. Built from heavy rounded rocks, it was clearly very old, maybe even ancient. And right in the middle of it, centered perfectly, was a narrow stone doorway. It didn't have a door, just an arch opening that led straight into a thick wall of trees. The forest behind it was dense and dark, with trunks that leaned and twisted, branches that tangled together like knots. It was beautiful, mysterious in that fairy tale kind of way. I stood there for a while, just taking it in. That's when my host told me the only rule of the house. I wasn't allowed to go into the forest. They said it was dangerous, and that there were animals in there that I wouldn't want to encounter. I remember nodding, saying I understood, but in the back of my mind, something didn't quite line up. As far as I knew, Iceland didn't have any large predators. Maybe some Arctic foxes, but those weren't known to stalk people. Still, I wasn't about to be rude. I respected their house, their land, their rules. Later that evening, Mom made dinner. Roasted lamb, root vegetables, a thick bread that she baked herself. We sat around the table and chatted. They asked me about America, my school, and what I hoped to learn while I was here. It was the kind of conversation that made you feel at home. After a while, I excused myself, said goodnight, and went to get my room set up. That's when I noticed something outside. My window overlooked the backyard and gave me a clear view of the stone wall. At first, I thought I was imagining the movement, just the wind maybe, but no, it was Mom. She was walking slowly towards the forest, carrying a basket. I watched as she reached the stone doorway. From what I could tell, she took a few things from the basket and placed them at the threshold, right in front of the opening. Then she stood there for a moment, unmoving, before turning around and heading back towards the house. It struck me as odd, but I didn't want to overthink it. Maybe it was some kind of composting thing or food for wildlife. I changed clothes, climbed into bed, and eventually fell asleep. A few days later, I came home late from class. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the property. As I walked up the driveway, I saw Dad in the distance. He was coming from the direction of the forest, and he was holding a basket, just like his wife had been. I said hello and asked what he was up to. He smiled and said he was just taking a walk. I pointed to the basket, curious, and asked what was in it. Without missing a beat, he changed the subject, asked how my day at school was going. I knew better than to press the issue. If he didn't want to tell me, he didn't have to. But the whole thing was starting to feel strange. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I stood at the window for a long time, staring at the stone door, wondering what the family was doing out there. What were they leaving? Why were they so secretive? I wasn't an adventurous person by nature, but something about that forest was starting to dig under my skin. And then I saw it. Something small moved in front of the doorway. I blinked, leaned in closer to the window. It was too far away, and whatever it was too small to see clearly, but something was definitely there. It darted forward, paused, and disappeared into the trees again. I know how it sounds, but I swear it looked like a little person, not a child, something smaller, maybe 2 feet tall at most. It only lasted a few seconds, then it was gone. I told myself it was a bird, or maybe a rabbit, or maybe even a trick of the light. I got into bed, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. The next morning over breakfast, I casually mentioned that I thought I saw something near the stone door the night before. Dad and Mom froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. They exchanged a glance. Then Mom said it was probably just the rabbits. She told me they sometimes left food out there for them. It kind of made sense. That would explain the baskets. But what I saw didn't look like a rabbit. Before I could say anything else, the son spoke up. He said they weren't rabbits. Immediately, Mom stood and told him to wash his hands and start his chores. He tried to argue, but she shut him down. The boy stormed off. I wanted to ask more, but clearly that wasn't the right moment. Later that day, I saw the son outside playing. His parents weren't around. He was sitting in the grass with a small collection of wooden toys, hand-carved horses, carts, and people. They were beautiful, intricate. Someone had spent a lot of time on them. I sat next to him and made small talk. Then, gently, I asked what he meant at breakfast, that they weren't rabbits. He hesitated. He looked around, then whispered that he wasn't supposed to talk about it. I promised him I wouldn't say anything to his parents. He said they were called the Hulu folk. I asked him what that was. He said they were the little people that lived in the forest. I didn't understand. I was about to ask him more when his mom shouted from the house, calling him inside. Without another word, he grabbed his toys and ran. As he did, he left one of his toys behind, a small wooden horse, beautifully carved and polished. I picked it up and slipped it into my jacket pocket. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Huldu folk? I'd never heard that word before. After dinner, I said I was heading to bed, went to my room, pulled out my laptop, and started digging. What I found stunned me. The Huldu folk are part of Icelandic folklore. Their name literally means hidden people. According to legend, they're small human-like beings who live in rocks, hills, and forests, especially places that appear untouched. They're said to be invisible to most people, only revealing themselves to a select few. Sometimes they're helpful, other times not so much. What surprised me the most wasn't just the stories, but how seriously Icelanders seem to take them. There are organizations that consult with construction companies and governments to ensure roads and buildings don't disturb the hidden people's dwellings. Some projects have even been rerouted altogether because of this. It was wild. I couldn't believe it. And yet, the pieces were starting to fall into place. The baskets, the secrecy, the rule about the forest. Even with all of that, I couldn't bring myself to believe that there were actual tiny people living out there. But I also couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I lay in bed for hours, tossing and turning. Eventually, I sat up and looked out the window again. The stone door was there, still and quiet. But something about it felt different now, charged, like it was watching me. I knew it was a bad idea, but I had to see it for myself.